Where do you start when everything seems to be falling apart?
Try to be sane in an insane asylum. How long you think you gonna manage? Your sanity ain't gonna manage long in an insane asylum. Everybody gotta be sane or you gonna go insane too.
Who's sending me this message? Am I not getting the message because I keep seeing it? And I'm trying to feel the energy because at one time I was fearful of it because I did see it. I have a lot. My schedule is like really busy and kind of balancing that with spiritual life. And I guess you can call myself kind of a loner.
Greetings. I want to welcome everyone to another segment of Foundational Friday on Enlightenment and Transformation. Of course, my name is Chief Yuya, and you are listening to our rudimentary spiritual instructional show that we have entitled Foundational Friday, right? Because pretty self-explanatory, because we're talking about the foundations of our spirituality and what we're building this entire movement upon, what we're building this entire journey on. And we're coming to the close of our 2015 fiscal year. It means something to some folk. It means something. And some of the segments and the styles of show that I've been working on this past maybe month or so have been really geared towards kind of us getting ourselves together. Yes, it's always about getting ourselves together, right? There's always that healing component. But more so, what I've really been aiming and directing on is clearing out the obstacles. And most of the times, the obstacles that you're going to be clearing out in terms of your spiritual work are mental. Unfortunately, a lot of times, okay, I know I got some bleeps and bloops coming in. But a lot of times when we're doing work, sometimes we don't realize that there's a spiritual divide, that we have to cross. But prior to even crossing that spiritual divide, we have to deal with the mental, because the mental is the gateway. As I said in my book, Grasping the Root of Divine Power, the mind is the gateway, it's the cosmic gateway to the spiritual world. So a lot of times you may be having, a lot of us, we have a lot of past life trauma or a lot of this life trauma. We just had a tough childhood or a tough adulthood, and we get into the spirituality as a form of escapism, and we don't really address those mental schisms. So what happens is that we're never ever truly able to bring into the spiritual world what we're supposed to bring. We never really bring the cool water libation because we're not able to carry the cool water. Let's say if it takes a completely sane and balanced person, if it takes a completely sane and balanced person, I want you to picture your mind as being a gateway. It takes a completely sane and balanced person to get through the gateway between the wall of your mind and the world of the spirit. And not only that, in order to carry something from one side to the other, you have to be balanced. So what happens is a lot of times maybe you're able to climb the wall, put a ladder up against the wall and peer over into the world of the spirits. You may even be able to go over and shout a message and hear a message back without realizing that you're not really in that space with them. You see, so that becomes a challenge at times. That's why a lot of times, if you think about it, when we get into a lot of our spiritual work or our spiritual knowing, and we get into doing the things that we want to do or envisioning the things that we want to do, it typically starts with some type of spiritual communication or divination. And for many of us, it stays in that space. It never grows beyond that space. Us just doing readings for ourselves or doing readings for our friends, because there's a part of us that knows that our spiritual work doesn't actually work, you see. So we kind of just stay in that zone of just, well, I'm doing a reading or I'm scrying or I'm meditating, and it never really goes anywhere beyond that. And that's because there's a part of us that knows that I have not honestly been able to traverse into the world of the spirits as of yet. I haven't been granted access as of yet. I've been able to climb the wall, peer in, that's your divination. They've been able to even shout a few messages back to me. But I haven't been able to really sustain myself in that world because I don't have the mental balancing that's necessary to be there and not go insane. See, a lot of people who force their way into the door and break their way in the door, these are the people who we say, man, yeah, they started dealing with this and dealing with that and got messed up. Their minds, they lost their minds. You see, that's a product of not, because you remember when you go into that world, you're going to amplify what it is that you are in this space, as above, so below, as above, as below, so above, right? So I'm saying all that to say that in many senses, dealing with Foundational Friday, which you all may have noticed is when we first started, 2010, I think, 2010, I think. When we first began, I was mainly going hard on Orisha, boom. And there was a reason I was doing an Orisha series. I wanted to clear up misconceptions about the Orisha that I was hearing or reading online, like a lot of just fictitious backwards information. So I said, okay, let me start that. We'll set the air, set the air clean with that. That's that Oya vibration, that clean sweep, knock everything down. So a lot of it was probably, for a lot of people, it felt like I was disputing their traditions and things like that. And maybe I was, but I wasn't directly affronting them. And then we started getting more into the nature and the quality of the spiritual work. And then if you notice, a lot of it turned into just dealing with the mentality, dealing with our minds. If you listen to Chief Speaks, you see that rarely is there a call that anyone calls in and directly asks about a spiritual issue. Most of the stuff that they're asking about is mental. So you start to see, if you highlight certain things, then the true blockages become apparent. 9 times out of 10, what's blocking you, because the spirits are giving, they're not withholding anything from you. So that thickness that you can't get across, that wall, that high wall that's created, whether it be a high wall of ego, which is still a product of the mind or the brain, or if it's a high wall of pain, which is still a product of the brain, because your pain is, you just have a history of the pain and you keep regenerating yourself with said history of that pain. You see, so those become the blockages to getting to heaven, quote unquote, because heaven is now. Heaven is now. Okay. But you have to get through, I'm not even going to say the hell, but you just have to get through the obstacles of the brain. The brain creates historical obstacle points. And a lot of times we tend to recreate those obstacle courses, even when unnecessary. So I'll say, do A, B, C, and D. Oh, I always have trouble with that. So you're not currently having trouble with that because you and I are having a conversation. You're not doing it right now. But you recreate the obstacle as soon as you're given the spiritual instruction. So we're going to get into that a little bit tonight. We're going to talk about regeneration, and we're going to talk about restoration. Regeneration and restoration. All right, that's not the titles of the show, but I'm just giving you some the topics that we're going to cover. All right. And as I have been doing in recent months, and I've been enjoying, because I'm also in the process of flushing out some old things in my life, just some stuff I don't need anymore or haven't been using. And, just I got right now, I have about 4 or 5 printers in my house. I don't need that many printers, but one is, well, this was really good printer. It came out. The quality is excellent. You can't even find I can't even find toner for this stuff anymore. But well, somebody may be able to use this printer. And then I got the, so it's a flushing that's going on, and I noticed that occurring or beginning. It started last year, really. A lot of purging, a lot of people being purged out of the circle. A lot of objects and things being lost or purged, just no longer needed, things shutting down that were no longer needed, so even with that, in these segments, I've been going through old music that I created that I didn't finish. Most of the stuff I didn't finish, and seeing, okay, is there a use? Do you put me in a space? So I've been enjoying that process, going through even some of the old music. It helps me to see where my mind was some years ago. Because all the stuff I've been playing is very old. But even in the lyrical writing, I'm seeing some of the things that I was aspiring for, if those are still valid or desired outcomes at this point. And sometimes that's the hard thing to admit. So again, we go back to the show on sentimentalism. Sometimes it's hard to admit that the things that we were targeting previously, we just don't care about as much anymore. Or it's just not relevant or as sensible as we once thought it was, because we learned something, Yeah. So with that, I'm going to play a cut, get myself in the zone. And then when I come back, we're going to talk about regeneration. All right. And why it's a necessary concept for us to start dealing with right now. All right.
What really happens to be the door? Light my fire may not be the thing that you desire, but with time we can find common ground. Get up off your ass, turn your life around. So reach your faith, so your doubts will start, and free your mind. It's really not that hard. So feed your faith, so your doubts will start, and free your mind. It's really not that hard. Black people, get up. Your harvest is past due. Regain the glory that eludes you. Brothers, grab hold and see what I see. Sisters, manifest what's been given through prophecy. Get up, get up, get up, get up. So your doubts will start, and free your mind. It's really not that hard. So feed your faith. Oh no. And free your mind. It's really not that hard. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. So feed your faith, so your doubts will start, and free your mind. It's really not that hard. Alright, stand tall, yeah. be strong. Oh, it's gonna be alright if you believe. Rise from the ashes of my burned out flame. No, no, there ain't no need to worry. No, no. I'll rise from the ashes of mystery, please. I know. I'll rise from the ashes of my your mind. Arise from the ashes of a burned out flame. Renew. Don't let that flame, don't let it burn. No, 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 no. Arise from the ashes of a burned out flame. Renew. Joy comes in the morning light, y'all. So feed your faith. Come on and renew your mind. Yes. Oh, you gotta be no. Arise, stand tall, be strong. Come on. Oh yeah. Yes. Arise from the ashes of a burned out flame. Renew your mind. Arise from the ashes of a burned out flame. Renew your mind. Arise from the ashes of a burned out flame. Renew your mind. Arise from the ashes of a burned out flame. Renew your mind.
All right. Here we go. Now I can breathe. Now I can breathe again. Okay. I'm done. Now I can get my thoughts together like a what. Like I said, sometimes I got to surround myself with moments and times and textures and images from a certain space and from a certain time. So that helped me. All right. And and for all my musician listeners, I know my guitar was out of tune. I know my bass was out of tune. And I know the drumming that was hitting some off. I know. I'm a very inspired music composer. And what that means is I do things very sloppily at first, and then I come back and fix. But I got to get it out. When it's there, I got to get it out. Whereas I have a partner, he does music, and he's very meticulous. He takes all day to work on a song. When he's done, it's perfect. It's ready to go. Me, I'll put something down in 20 minutes, literally. Matter of fact, the lyrics to that song I wrote while I was sitting on the piano playing the chords of the song. So but that's because that's what I needed. That's what my spirit needed. And, so I just got it out. Kind of like I'm speaking right now. Everything is that I do with these shows is I don't have cue cards. I'm like, okay, now make sure I talk about this point. And, it's very inspired. And you may hear me stutter a little bit or go back and say, wait, no, not that word, this word. And, because of where it's channeling and where it's coming from. So sometimes it's a little sloppy. And then I got to come back and fix it. Or sometimes I just let it be sloppy. I'm always encouraged by that. I think I had shared that once before, where I like to listen to raw music a lot, like live concerts, especially of some of my favorite artists who may be messing up, not hitting the note just right, a little off, hearing little mistakes. I really enjoyed that when they took the old Motown, like back when CDs and stuff came out. I remember they went back and they did all of the old Motown songs and they remastered them. And when they remastered them, you heard mistakes. If you were really listening, you could hear mistakes in there. And I enjoyed that so much, because you get to feel the humanity of the artist. Like, okay, yeah, you're not a machine. You can hit a off note. You can, that drum roll, you didn't come back in on time. Okay, cool. But you get a sense of the person's effort. You can feel the effort. And unfortunately, a lot of times in the commercial world, we never see that part of it. And that's why sometimes we get addicted to these instant gratification modules, or these instant gratification. There's people who are very, very skilled at presenting stuff to us and making it look like it started off this way, and that's never the case. There's always a process, and it's so funny. Sister Kim is IMing me, and she just said, not Luther, not Lufa. Well, even Lufa has a vocal coach. In fact, one of my very close relatives, very close, used to play for Luther, and he hated playing with Luther, because Luther was such a perfectionist in the studio and on stage. Like he toured with him. And so, if you're that much of a perfectionist and you're constantly practicing, that means you ain't got it. It ain't there yet. So even Lufa, Sister Kim, needed to practice. But yeah, by the time we hear it, he's such an executionist. His practice doesn't mean that I hit an off note and I'm hitting a better note. His practice means this is amazing, but I'm going to make it more amazing. But I just don't want it to be amazing. It's got to be extra amazing. It's got to be so amazing, So that some people, is just like Stevie Wonder, but I've heard Stevie make mistakes. You listen to some of them harmonica riffs, you hear little off notes and stuff. But with certain people, their genius is so amazing that the only thing you can compare them to is their last work. Even when you listen to certain hip hop artists, you may listen to Jay-Z and say, oh, he's falling off. But if you compare him with anybody else, he's still better than them. He's just not as good as he was before, and that's a form of regeneration and paying attention to your regenerative patterns. What I really wanted to speak on, one of the things I wanted to speak on, and as I was going through and I found that particular cut, I said, this is the vibration I need. Arise from the ashes of a burnt out flame, right? So, which was the chorus. And obviously, what am I speaking about there in that particular lyric? I'm talking about the Bennu bird. The Bennu, a lot of you may know as the phoenix. Also later taken and designed as the dragon, okay, in other cultures. But it started out as a bird. It went from a bird to the phoenix to a dragon, okay? And not to say that any one representation is less authentic than the other. They all have their significance. They all have their power, but one of the key pieces of the Bennu bird in terms of not only name, but in terms of concept was, of course, the regenerative aspect. The Bennu was always assimilated, associated with Ra, being that image or that spirit of the sun, being that energy and that vibration that was self-regenerative, that came into being on its own, unfurled itself from nothingness. Okay. And when you deal with the vibration of the Bennu, what you're really dealing with is coming into being from nothingness. But when you come into being as a shiny object, as a shiny individual. I know some of you have heard, especially those of you who've gotten consultations with me, you've heard me use that term before, shiny, right? And because in like Sangoma tradition, we deal with the shiny a lot, and the shiny is like the shininess of your spirit. So In order to have a shiny spirit, you have to have a clean body. You have to have a clean moral character. And this makes you more attractive to different spirits that are around you. But that shine comes from allowing the things that are on you that are old and no longer needed to die around you. So that way, when you come forth again, you come forth brand new, like a newborn baby, you know. And that newborn baby aspect where everything is clean, it attracts a certain vibration to it. And when you understand or you think about the vibration of just to be self-created, it basically means that you got to deal with your own stuff. You know, when you're dealing with the Bennu, you're not dealing with the story of Papa Bennu and Mama Bennu, and they come together and they make a baby Bennu bird, and you know, it's not that, or the Mama Phoenix and Daddy Phoenix. Even when you look at the science of the dragon vibration, right? Most of the time, the dragons are female. Makes you ask, like, well, where's Papa Dragon? You know, and you start to realize that these are self-regenerative creatures. A lot of times you'll see images with of the dragon with their tail in their mouth, representing that continual cycle of consumption and production, you know, consuming myself so that way I can become myself again, so that I will have the energy and the force to become myself again, you see. And interesting enough, when you're dealing with the Bennu in ancient Kemet, or what many of you may know as Egypt or Nile Valley, wasn't always that name, by the way. You know, Tameri is a very significant name for that region. But you know, there's levels to this thing. You know, before we said Egypt, we might have said the Middle East. You know, then at least we separated and said Egypt, and at least we finally said, okay, that's a part of Africa. Cool. Then we figured out, well, it was Kemet. Then we figured out, well, no, it's really Nile Valley civilization. It wasn't just up there. And then we figured out, well, it was Tameri, you know. So it goes on layers and layers and layers and layers and layers, which is awesome. Sometimes the layers are significant. Sometimes just get that information and start applying it. Sometimes that's really, the space that we need to come from when we're dealing with this. But anyway, so the Bennu, significant to our Yoruba cousins. When you look at the Bennu in word form, one of the meanings of the word Bennu or a Benin, similar to Benin, because the Benin was also the stone that was associated with the Bennu. You had the Benin and then you had the Benbin. Okay, but before it goes into Benbin, that root being to rise, the Ben, but Bennu also means palm tree. Now, when you think about your regenerative stories and the creation stories of the Yoruba pantheon, you know what was planted in Ile Ife, or Ile, house, Ife means life, or it also means love. So the house of life, or the house of love, where all creation began, there was a palm tree planted there. And from that, it gave shade and it gave life to the inhabitants. Okay. So you have, again, this idea of something springing forth. Okay. Something springing out. And when we're dealing with the Bennu, that regenerative aspect, we're told that the Bennu comes from the Okan of Osir, or it comes from the heart realm of Osiris. Some of you may know him as Osiris. Okay. So Bennu, or that regenerative living force, comes from the heart of the seer. Okay. Comes from the heart of the seer, because Osiris, we're dealing with the opening of the eye, right? So the Bennu becomes a significant character, especially when we're coming to the close of another financial year, when we think about how we're going to come forth again, how we're going to come forth by day again. I won't take you all the way down that road, but let's just say how we're going to come forth again. It becomes significant when we think about, do I come forth shiny, or do I come forth regenerating my old psychosis, which probably at this point holds very little value. You see, sometimes we carry certain thoughts and images and ideas about ourselves, and we don't test it for validity based on where our life is currently headed, or our current positioning in life. We just say this is just where we are. This is just what I am. You know, like I take myself, right? Because I use myself as an example a lot. So, not because I like talking about myself, but because I talk to so many people through my work. I don't ever want anyone to think I'm using them as an example. Sometimes I do, but usually if I do, it's a more wider collective example. So a couple people could say, is that me? But we could all look at ourselves right now. We can use all of ourselves as this example. Look on your body, right? And I'm just going to find some. Okay, my knuckles. I have scars on my knuckles that I've had since I was a teenager. Yeah. Some of these, since I was a teenager, right? Now, we know that our cells regenerate themselves every 7 years. Okay. I'm older than 8 and I'm older than 15. I know, big shock. Yeah, but I'm older than 15. All right. So, so I have some scars on me, and I'm just I have more than this, but this is in front of me. I'm sitting here. I can look at my hands real quick. So I have scars on my knuckles that I've had for many, many years, for decades, actually. Right. But if I've regenerated myself every 7 years, why do I still have these scars? What purpose do they serve at this point? This is still not a part of my body that is healing or in need of healing. So why are these scars still all over my knuckles? These scars are over my knuckles because when I'm regenerating myself or I'm becoming a new person as I see it, I'm regenerating myself from the psychopathy, my historical psychopathy. Okay, so I'm regenerating myself from history and from memory, not from the purpose and the pureness of my heart. Because what lives inside of the heart? The ori, the soul. Okay, so when I'm regenerating myself, I'm not regenerating myself from my soul. I'm regenerating myself from my mind. Maybe when I receive these scars on my knuckles, there's a trauma that's associated with it. There's a history that maybe feeds my ego that's associated with having these particular scars. So when I recreate myself, subconsciously, I say, I want those scars again. Now, this now means I can't be a hand model. You know, I can't do commercials holding lotion or punching, digits on an ATM machine or something, or holding a American Express black card. I'm done. Can't do that because I regenerated myself with scars that I actually don't need. So I'm blocking myself from certain opportunities because I refuse to regenerate. I refuse to be reborn from the ashes of something that is burned out. Burnt out meaning I no longer need it. Shake the dust off. Instead, I'm regenerating myself and then taking some of those old ashes and throwing them back on me again. I don't have cosmic dust on me. I have earth dust on me. You see? It's just an example. And I'm saying me, I'm putting myself out there, but I'm not the only one. I know there's a bunch of you right now looking at a whole bunch of big scars all up and down your arms, on the side of your face, bullet holes in the side of your behind and things like that. Toe got shot off back in 89 and coke deal gone bad. I know you guys got some stuff too, so don't just put me out there like that. I'm just saying. So we're regenerating ourselves from the wrong place. We're not regenerating ourselves through our moon phases and saying, hey, I've turned some of the mythology of what I perceived life to be, and I found out what the reality is based on those things. And now I can regenerate myself as that great hawk or that great Bennu bird coming straight from the heart, instead of regenerating myself based on what I'm saying I can't do. So when somebody like you, Yas, says, hey, now is a season, I might do a reading and say, this is a season for you to do this, or you do this, and you say, I'm no good at that. I tried that. Well, when did you last try? It was like 10 years ago. And it didn't work. Well, you've regenerated since then. But you're regenerating with that thought. So I can't take you over to heaven. I can't take you to Orun. I can't take you to the Duat. We want to go to the Duat. Come on, that's where it's fun. That's where the celebration is. And there's a power in that celebration of that newness of ourselves. You see? But all you can do is do divination and observe it, but you're not allowed in the door because you're bringing too much of that stinky earth dust. Earthlings stink in Orun. You can find them very quickly because they stink. That's that earth, that old dead earth that's rotting on you. See, that's really the science of that. So when you're dealing with the Bennu, or even what we call the Benbin stone, which is often used on many of the obelisks and Kemet. Maybe we'll break down the obelisk, even the shape, because that's an important aspect too in regeneration. Because you see the obelisk a lot of times it represented that male phallus energy or that potential for coming back out of the waters of Noon. Okay. But coming back out as that bird, coming back out as that fresh and clean energy becomes critical when you're finding yourself always in the same dysfunctional space whenever you're attempting any type of spiritual work or you're attempting any type of new spiritual thing. You make these in the year, right? What does everybody do? What do you call it? The resolutions. What's your New Year's resolution? I don't get asked that, but I know people. I know that's a thing. I know people are into that, to start to understand, well, why is it that when I am coming into that space and I am trying something different, I always end up back in the same place? You have not cleansed your mind. That's why this isn't working for you. This is why when you come into the world, Eshu makes you forget. You forget everything. And there's a reason for that. All right, you know what? I'm gonna take a quick break. I'm gonna play something again. My music is my lifeline tonight. All right, so bear with me. And then I'm gonna explain more why we forget when we come into the world.
Where you think you're going? Fooling myself, thinking that we're through. You caught me slipping, still sliding back to you. Things can go on the way they've been. Obedience to too many masters lead to dead ends. I mean, I'm not trying to say this ain't love, not trying to say we don't fit like hand in glove. Ways and go, I can't turn away. Life's in disarray. You cross my path and haunt my day. Can't keep running.
Okay, cool. So I knew I needed that vibration. Sometimes the energy that we give out in terms of like our art and our creative works, for me, I always see it as, they're forms of libations, so typically before I do a show or even before I do a lecture, anything, like any type of work where I have to present to people, I start with the libation, and I want to invoke, or an invocation really, where I want to bring certain energies into the space to help me to say whatever it is I need to say, Um, so we're gonna get to this Bennu again for a second, okay? So another energy, not another energy, I'll say, but another space where we see the representation of this Bennu bird is in the sacred Odu, Oshe Meiji. And in this particular Odu, it's symbolized by the process of decompilation. Okay, so decompilation is decompiling things that have been put together, breaking them back down in order for them to be put back together again. And many of you may know, or many of you probably don't know, but now you will know that this particular Odu deals with fire, but graduation. It's high fire, but it's ascending into a new space that you weren't before. You have a strong Oshun element present, and you have a strong Eshu element present. And you know that Eshu deals with, even by name, even when you take it to Kemetic, Shu being air, but it means to launch or to lift off. That's why it's that air vibration. And Eshu is the same thing, to start or initiate. Well, you have Bennu, which means to rise. You see, and really it's to rise and shine. Is really what it is. It's to rise and shine. You know, shine like the sun, rise and shine. Which is interesting. I don't know if any of you have had, or you may say that to your children. I know I always say when I wake them up, all right, rise and shine, rise and shine. You know, kind of a family pride thing. You know, but what you come to understand with this particular bird, one of the things one of the symbols that's present and very significant is that Atef, which is that crown, you know, where you have the two feathers of Ma'at on it, but that crown representing royalty, but that graduation, the Atef is typically worn by a seer, okay, so, or Sar, some of you may know, but that aspect right there is significant, because when we say, when we're rising or we're being reborn out of our situations, what are we being reborn as? What are we being reborn into? Well, you immediately see, based on the Bennu bird, if we're coming from our heart, we're coming from our purpose, that's when we can say we were kings and queens. What signifies you as that royalty is coming straight from the pure character and divination of the Okan, or the pure character and divination of your heart. You see, that's why when that Bennu, or that palm tree, and a lot of times when you saw it in Kemet, it was specified as like a willow tree, but what you really saw, oftentimes you saw the bird on the willow tree. Okay, but what you start to see, even with the Odu of Ose, right, you start to see that we're dealing with the graduation. One of the stories associated with it is a story of a young woman sitting on a throne. The throne had white feathers on it. When she got up, the feathers were red, and everyone praised her. Okay, so I mean, you know, the Yoruba stuff is super cryptic. It's not like the Kemetic stuff where you can read and read and read and read. Yoruba stuff is short to the point, so you start decoding immediately. But the young woman was Oshun. She went to the throne. That means she was able to go into that place of royalty, that sacred space. That's the Okan, the heart. She sat on the throne. There were white feathers, white parrot feathers, representing the purity of youth. When she sat down and got up, they were red, meaning that she went through her menses. And all of the people who were there, which were we'll call the heavenly host, you know, what we'll call those high vibratory energies of evolution, they praised her when she got up. I've said this before. When Heru was a child, the Neteru took care of Heru. When Heru became a man, he commanded the Neteru. That's how it works. When the light is low, you need help from all these spirits. Help me, help me, help me, help my rent, my boyfriend, my girlfriend. And then when you become a spiritual adult, and like the phoenix, or like the Bennu, or like that dragon, you come down and you consume yourself in the fullness of all of that, and you rise again. Now you rise again with the crown of Asar. Now you command and delegate the spirits that are around you. You see, and in each regenerative movement after that becomes a higher level of authority, of spiritual authority on the earth. Spiritual authority within yourself, a higher level of empowerment. Why? Because each time I'm taking a revisiting journey back to the heart, back to the Okan, back to the heart of Osiris, to the core, into the center of Asor. Okay. So that's very important. And you know how we also know that it's associated with O'Shea and Oshun. That's why you always hear me say Oshun protects the head of the consciously elevated. Once you come into a space of conscious elevation, Oshun helps you out, makes sure that you don't go crazy. She makes sure that you don't go crazy. But we know this because we had this this concept of Bennu Asar. And Bennu Asar was related to the planet Venus, which was said to be the transportation vehicle or the ship of Bennu Asar, which is another form of Asar or Osiris. It's the rising or the ascending aspect of Asar. So we called it Bennu Asar. And his ship that he rode, his ride was the planet Venus. Now, you know that Venus, of course, is associated with Oshun. So it takes us right there. So when his ascending or rising space, he's protected and cradled and insulated by the vibration of Oshun. That's why working with Oshun is one of the greatest forms of protection you possibly can. I always tell people when they want to go to attack on people, just ask Oshun to raise you up above people. That's the greatest protection. Raise me up so they can't even, the arrows won't even reach me. So, and I know it doesn't sound as tough. So some people, when I say, they don't believe, no, I need some Ogun, I need some Shango. Yeah, maybe you do, but I'm telling you, that's more work. Ogun and Shango, they're one Orisha, two Orisha armies, but you got to keep feeding the army. But when you raise your civilization up above the savages who would strive to harm you and to hurt you, then you don't have to do anything. Sometimes that is the immaturity of the of certain communities. We go into certain communities and there's a lot of complaining about what is and what is, but there's no one's ever going to do anything about it. And sometimes all of that fieriness and that complaining is only because there's a fear to face the real enemy. The real enemy always begins with what's in your head. So instead of doing that, I'm going to get into a basement somewhere or the back of a bookstore or at this event, and I'm just going to go off. Yeah, we need to do this and we need to do that and blah, 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 blah. It gets funny, but once you face your real enemy, and the thing is, when you regenerate with that thought and that mind frame, you may regenerate with something that's so critical. You may regenerate with the thought that certain individuals, people, or situations are your enemy that no longer are. They've moved on. They've risen to something else. They're not even aimed at you. But because you're regenerating yourself with that same psychological history, then the thought projections that you're sending out into the world that take the form of many things now become your still standard and current enemies. Let's say, for instance, as a man, if I feel that all women are against me, women hate me, I just the opposite sexes, I just can't get along with women, right? And I'm regenerating myself with that thought. Now, let's say if I say I can't, women hate me because I'm young and hot, right? Now I'm aging. So now I'm 60, 70 years old, and I still have this thought projection I'm putting out there because I'm young and hot. Women hate me and they're jealous of me or whatever, right? So what happens is that thought projection still becomes a thing. It still takes the shapes of triangles and octagons and circles, because that's how electromagnetics are projected out above the earth. And then they come back down and create a reality. Another show, right? But what happens is it may not project itself in the form that my granddaughters don't like me or young women don't like me. It will take the form of anything that it's going to interact with my life. So it may mean that I may have health issues. It may mean that my water turns against me. I'm having leaks all over my house, or my water is dirty, or, it may take the form of rude and disgusting next door neighbors, or just all kind of misfortune and calamities that come at me because I'm perpetuating this eternal struggle and this holographic projection of resistance that's against me, that's not even against me. So it can't take the form of the actual thing that's against me, because that thing is gone. It's moved. It's not even here anymore. It's not here anymore. It's going to take the form of something else. And it's not to say, that's not a fancy way of me saying get over it. That's a fancy way of me saying when you consume yourself in the fires and the passions of the things that are affecting your life, then that means they're done. They've been consumed. And that personal assessment and inventory is critical. Where am I at now? How do I identify my enemies now? How do I identify what success is now? What are my aims and approaches right now in this moment? How do I carry myself? And that's what I do when I work with my Cyrus Life clients. It's, all right, this is what you're dealing with over the next 30 days. And we do 30-day increments, check-ins. And it's some of the things, well, it's always a thing. Whatever we were worried about, or they were worried about when they first signed up, after a month or two, we're on to something else. And sometimes I got to remind them. I keep notes, say, you notice we have been talking about, maybe your child acting up anymore. We haven't been talking about them trying to take your house. You notice we fixed that? Oh yeah. You notice we ain't talking about anymore. You ain't getting no customers in your business. Notice you're getting customers now. So now we can't keep falling back on that. I'm afraid to spend money. I might not get customers. We fixed that. We consumed that earthly issue. And regenerating yourself from the heart and not regenerating yourself from the mind is very important, because the mind holds the historical memory. And it's not to say that we should forget the memory. We don't. We leave it there, but we don't recreate ourselves from our past, because then we're just stuck in a cycle. And we want to break the cycles. We want to transcend in new spaces so that we have the body in the form that can fit over the wall, or fit through the wall, fit through the door, that can take us into the realm of the spirits. We don't want to just keep peering over the edge and say, hey, what they doing in there? That looks fun. Oh, there's my divination. Let me tell you what your ancestors are doing. No, we want to be there. We want to rise with that crown, so we have that spiritual authority to open up that door, go in there and bring some of our good stuff with us. We don't always want to leave the tobacco and the rum and the gin and the flowers at the foot of the altar. Let's take it with us and then come right back down. Having that ability to go between heaven and earth. That's bringing that SU out in you, right? And we just covered the SU is the launching of things, the air of things, okay? Similar to, again, the Bennu, where you also have the Bin stone. And we also have the SU stone. All right, so it's all related. All right, that has been our Foundational Fridays. I want to thank you all for tuning in. And I want to encourage you again to, if you're not a member of the Sadula House Spiritual Center, to sign up and become a member of the Sadula House Spiritual Center. For classes, just go to saduluhouse.com. There's a link right there. It says sign up. All you got to do is click it, sign up. That's it. If you want a consultation, right there, you're going to see a thing for contact. It's a link. You can get your consultation right there. And we're getting ready to set up a separate site just for consultations, by the way. And the only reason we have all this stuff so separated is just to make it easier on people sometimes when they're like, well, how do I get a consultation? Okay, well, go to suchandsuch.com. How do I get I want to talk to someone about the class. SadulaHouse.com. I'm looking for your archive shows. How do I get the archive shows? Enlightenmenttransformation.com. So we're trying to separate them just for convenience, to make things easier. And it makes it easier on us too, But anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you all. I will see you all this Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern, for Chief Speaks, all right, on High Frequency Radio, as well as Enlightenment and Transformation, and on YouTube. If you enjoyed this information, please share it, comment on it, like it, do all that good stuff that lets us know that we're not just talking to our phones. All right, until such time, peace, power, love, regeneration, vision, clarity, and the purest of my heart's intentions go out to you all. Hotep.